Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. I'm reading The Wheel of Time for the first time and sharing the experience with you. This is One Good Turn, The Eye of the World, and today I am covering Chapter 30! They don't even get one night's rest before we get another chase scene. Okay, look, I know I complained a bit about the chase scene in the last episode, but this particular chase scene didn't last too long, and I am enjoying the story tremendously. This kind of feels like we might be entering into a new phase of the book, because it sounds like now Perrin and Egwene will be making their way to Caemlyn. We know that Rand and Mat are making their way to Caemlyn, and, well, now that Perrin has lost the coin, unless it was included in the belongings that were given back, which means they could end up setting a trap for, the White Cloaks could end up setting a trap for Moiraine and Lan. They'll hopefully decide to head to Caemlyn as well, if they do end up losing track of Perrin. Moiraine and Lan, I mean. The chapter starts in the evening, and minor bit of confusion right at the start. It starts with Egwene sat by the fire staring up at the fragment of statue, but Perrin went down by the pool to be alone. I did think that we were getting an Egwene POV here, not a Perrin POV. So I was a little confused at first. It didn't last long, the confusion, but it was a moment. Perrin is contemplating his axe, and we get a very nice scene between Perrin and Elias. Elias says, "You hate her that much?" Startled, he jumped and half raised the axe before he saw who it was. Can you read my mind too? Like the wolves? Elias doesn't answer that question. He does not answer that question, and I find it very curious. I think he can. But Elias says instead, "A blind man could read your face, boy. Well, speak up. Do you hate the girl? Despise her, that's it? You were ready to kill her because you despise her, always dragging her feet, holding you back with her womanish ways. Egwene never dragged her feet in her life. She always does her share. I don't despise her. I love her." I read that and I was like, ho, good for you, Perrin. But then he undercuts it just a moment later. Not like that. I mean, she isn't like a sister, but she and Rand... Blood and ashes, if the ravens caught us, I don't know. Yes, you do. If she had to choose her way of dying, which do you think she'd pick? One clean blow of your axe, or the way the animals we saw today died? I know which I'd take. I don't have any right to choose for her. You won't tell her, will you? About... it's at that moment that I think to Perrin, you could ask her. You could have that serious conversation with her. Not an easy conversation to be had, certainly, but... And you don't even have to tell her that you considered it in that moment. You could just be like, hey, if we're in another situation just like this one, would you prefer I do this? Awkward conversation indeed. Perrin talks about how he hates the axe. It was one thing when he was a child and you could walk around town and imagine, but now he doesn't ever want to use it again. And he's prepared to throw it in the river or the water. And Elias wisely says, "You'll use it, boy. And as long as you hate using it, you will use it more wisely than most men would. Wait. If ever you don't hate it any longer, then will be the time to throw it as far as you can and run the other way." The ironic thing being, if he doesn't hate it, he probably wouldn't, right? Right? And then similar to what I had just intimated, he thinks to himself, easy for him to say, what if I wait, then can't throw it away? As they are talking, they both get a very, very intense message from the wolves. And they both go chasing towards Egwene, telling her to douse the fire. It's so intense that Elias burns his hand on the kettle, getting it off the fire and trying to stamp out the fire. Egwene is, of course, confused, and Elias tells them, Go east or west, find a place to hide, and I'll join you as soon as I can, if they see a wolf. And basically, it's that there are men coming. We don't know anything about these men. I certainly didn't expect who they ended up being, although it kind of makes sense, I guess, because I don't necessarily think it would be agents of the Dark One who would go into the safety zone. But then again, I guess there's a fine line between being an agent of the light and being a dark friend, considering who it ends up being. Anyway, Perrin explains to Egwene, there are a lot of men coming on horses. They came up behind the wolves, but the men didn't see them. They're heading toward the pool. Probably they don't have anything to do with us. It's the only water for miles. But Dapple says... He glanced over his shoulder. The evening sun painted odd shadows on her face. Shadows that hid her expression. What is she thinking? Is she looking at you as if she doesn't know you anymore? Does she know you? Dapple says they smell wrong. It's sort of the way a rabid dog smells wrong. So he is certainly at least a little more comfortable speaking to Egwene about this new wolfish ability of his. They end up hiding on a small hill where the remnants of Arthur Hawkwing's hand was. So they are in his palm. I'm sure there must be some symbolism, literary thing there. I didn't spend too much time thinking about it, and as I'm stream of consciousing here, I can't really think of what that could mean, but I'm sure it's there. As they're doing this chase, though, I do wonder whether or not they would travel outside of the safe zone. I did have a concern there, but they don't. So they've separated from Elias, and they found their hiding place. We get an exchange. He motioned for Egwene to join him. She did not move, so he slid back down to the base of the hill and told her what he had found. Egwene peered up the hill with her head pushed forward. How can you see anything? She asked. Perrin opened his mouth, then shut it. So, I'm thinking he's getting night vision from his wolfish abilities. I think that's what that is, and it's neat, and I wondered if his eyes started to turn gold or not. I don't think that they do or did. I feel like that would have been mentioned in the tent later on in the chapter if they were. And I don't think we know for certain that the eyes are a sign of the wolfish thing. Elias's eyes could be an Aiel thing, and I kind of suspect he might be an Aiel from the way he interacted with the traveling people. Possibly. There are a lot of men, a lot of bands, a lot of parties looking around. It's a very dangerous situation for them. We get, I think, one of my favorite exchanges of the chapter. He saw Egwene nod, but in the dark she did not realize it. We'll be all right, Perrin. Light, he thought wonderingly. She's trying to comfort me. The shouts went on and on. Small knots of torches moved in the distance, flickering points of light in the darkness. Perrin, Egwene said softly, will you dance with me at Sunday, if we're home by then? His shoulders shook, he made no sound, and he did not know if he was laughing or crying. I will. I promise. Against his will, his hands tightened on the axe, reminding him that he still held it. His voice dropped to a whisper. I promise, he said again, and hoped. Very, very sweet. And despite the fact that he seems to think regularly that he doesn't know how to talk to women, he usually seems to say the right things, or decent things. As Perrin contemplates running or continuing to run, a bunch of men with torches surround the hill. They know that someone is up there, and they hear a voice from the dark telling them that if they come down and answer their questions, they will let them live. Actually, let me find it. One of the White Cloaks, and at this point we know they are White Cloaks. One of the White Cloaks stepped his horse forward and shouted up the hill. If you can understand human speech, come down and surrender. You'll not be harmed if you walk in the light. If you don't surrender, you will all be killed. You have 1 minute. So, they're White Cloaks. That's not good. Even though they say, if you walk in the light, we already have enough experience with them to know that pretty much anyone that isn't them must therefore be a dark friend. The two of them aren't sure what to do. Perrin, Egwin whispered, we can't outrun them. If we don't give up, they'll kill us. Perrin? Elias and the wolves were still free. Another distant bubbling scream marked a white cloak who had hunted Dapple too closely. If we run... Egwin was looking at him, waiting for him to tell her what to do. If we run... He shook his head wearily and stood up like a man in a trance, stumbling down the hill toward the Children of the Light. He also thinks to himself, why are the White Cloaks so persistent, as if they hate wolves with a passion? Why do they smell so wrong? I think they're smelling the zealotry on them, the evil. It's gonna take a lot of work at this point for Jordan to convince me that the Children of the Light are genuinely in any way good. I'm trying to understand what manner of benefit they are. It really feels like there are a lot of these factions who are the only good faction, so to speak, all claiming to be for the light and yet attacking everyone else who claims to be for the light and accusing them of being dark. And I'm also wondering, when we get to know the Aes Sedai organization, the Amerlin seat, and so on, in more depth, I'm wondering if they are going to come off in similar ways as the White Cloaks here. I'm very curious, like, if there are any genuinely good organizations in this world. Anyone that aren't zealots. As Perrin is about to drop the axe, we get a very sad moment. For a moment, he stared at the lance head, enough sharp steel to go completely through him, and abruptly he shouted, "No!" It was not at the horseman, he shouted. Out of the night, Hopper came, and Perrin was one with the wolf. Hopper, the cub who had watched the eagles soar and wanted so badly to fly through the sky as the eagles did. The cub who hopped and jumped and leapt until he could leap higher than any other wolf, and who never lost the cub's yearning to soar through the sky. Out of the night, Hopper came and left the ground in a leap, soaring like the eagles. The White Cloaks had only a moment to begin cursing before Hopper's jaws closed on the throat of the man with his lance leveled at Perrin. And he does well enough, but he also takes a serious blow. His good eye met Perrin's too for just an instant. "Run, brother!" He whirled to leap again, to soar one last time, and a lance pinned him to the earth. A second length of steel thrust through his ribs, driving into the ground under him. Kicking, he snapped at the shafts that held him. To soar. So it's a well-written passage in all, including the stuff I didn't include in the reading. I don't remember Hopper being mentioned in any serious depth leading up to this, so I feel for him. Like I said, it's a well-written passage, and you feel a lot of emotion. I also wonder if perhaps it might have been more powerful had we had a little bit of Hopper earlier on. Just a thought. It is still very tragic, don't get me wrong. At that point, Perrin lets out a wolf-like cry, more specifically a wordless scream that had something of a wolf's cry in it. He can't tell if he's him or Hopper, and he goes in for an attack, and he gets knocked out. And he mumbles the phrase, "soar like the eagles," when he wakes up later, which says that he was still very much feeling Hopper. He wakes up, and Egwin is in the same room with him, and ultimately this is going to be a questioning scene, an interrogation scene. And I'm just going to point out, if they really wanted to get to the truth, the White Cloaks, I mean, they would have kept the two separate and then asked them each to tell the story without speaking to the other. Too bad they didn't do that. Or perhaps it is for the best they didn't. Or perhaps it really just doesn't matter. They have already made up their mind. Because these guys are zealots. Nevertheless, he wakes up and he realizes he's in a square tent as big as a medium-sized room in a farmhouse, with ground cloth for a floor, oil lamps on tall stands, one in each corner, giving a bright light. And we don't even get a good view of Egwin other than that she's kneeling and watching him. And she says, "Thank the light, Perrin. I was afraid they had killed you." It doesn't here explicitly state that Egwin was tied up. So a perhaps naive part of me was thinking, well, maybe they're in, like, a medical tent or something to that effect. but perhaps that was indeed a bit naive of me. Instead of answering, he stared at the gray-haired man seated in the lone chair in the tent. A dark-eyed, grandfatherly face looked back at him, a face at odds in his mind with the white and gold tabard the man wore, and the burnished armor strapped over his pure white undercoat. It seemed a kindly face, bluff and dignified, and something about it fit the elegant austerity of the tent's furnishings. So he's got the grandfatherly paladin look about him. The furniture in the room is well crafted. He thinks someone like Master Luhan or Master Idir, the cabinet maker, would be able to appreciate much of it. That says something about the White Cloaks, I think. The man is looking through two small piles of objects, their belongings, essentially. The silver coin Moraine had given him toppled out, and the man pushed it back thoughtfully. That's going to be an important thing later. But it's uncertain for the time being if this counts as the coin having been taken from Perrin. So we don't know if Moraine loses contact with him. And again, that puts her plans up in the air right now, as far as whether or not she will continue to seek out Perrin specifically. Then he looks at the axe. Perrin tries to get up, and then he realizes that he is tied up and bound. For the first time, he realized that he was tied hand and foot. His eyes went to Egwene. She shrugged ruefully and twisted so that he could see her back. Half a dozen lashings wrapped her wrists and ankles, the cords making ridges in her flesh. I read the word lashings, and I thought that they had whipped her. Before I finished that sentence, I was about to get very angry. Perrin is surprised, though, and he thinks, "What do they think we are?" The gray-haired man watches them, and then someone walks in. A tall man stepped into the tent. His face was long and gaunt, with eyes so deeply set they seemed to look out from caves. There was no excess flesh on him, no fat at all. His skin was pulled tight over the muscle and bone beneath. So, very scary skeleton man. This suggests to me there's very little of this man left within him. There's very little life to him. He is completely consumed by his ideology, perhaps. Maybe either way, he's scary. Perrin notes that it's night outside, so I was a bit curious how long he'd been out. I'm guessing it can't have been more than a couple of hours. The two chat, the two being the grandfatherly man and the newcomer. It's also very interesting to me that they speak so freely. We can't truly say how freely they speak, but they speak reasonably freely, seeming, in front of their prisoners. I suppose it speaks to a certain degree of confidence. More than anything, they say, "My lord captain." "Be at your ease, child Biar. You have tallied our costs for this encounter." The tall man moved his feet apart, but other than that, Perrin did not see anything ease about his stance. 9 men dead, my lord captain, and 23 injured, 7 seriously. All can ride, though. 30 horses had to be put down. They were hamstrung. He emphasized that in his emotionless voice, as if what had happened to the horses were worse than the deaths and injuries to men. On first read-through, one would think that means he cares about horses. But as we get through this, it's hard to imagine this guy caring about anything. Very interesting. "Many of the remounts were scattered. We may find some at daybreak, my lord captain, but with wolves to send them on their way, it will take days to gather them all. The men who are supposed to be watching them have been assigned to night guard until we reach Camelin." "We do not have days, child Biar. We ride at dawn. Nothing can change that. We must be in Camelin in time, yes?" "As you command, my lord captain." "And what do we have to show for it, aside from these 2 younglings?" He goes on to say that he has had Hopper skinned, and it will make a fine rug, which severely aggravates Perrin, and he starts struggling against his bonds, and interestingly, we get the line, "The ropes dug into his skin, his wrists became slippery with blood, but they did not give." How tight must those bonds be that they are already slippery with blood? Because there were no thoughts about cutting off circulation, and I don't think there was any comment about him struggling against them previously. So that was an interesting bit of flavor there. BR looks at them, and it is... I'm gonna describe it as a dark, evil look, but the actual description is... Egwin started back from him. His face was as expressionless as his voice, but a cruel light burned in his sunken eyes as surely as flames burned in Ba'alzaman's. BR hated them as if they were enemies of long years instead of people never seen before tonight. Perrin stares back wolfishly and then chastises himself for it. He thinks, I'm a man, not a wolf. Light, there has to be an end to this. But he continues the hateful gaze. The captain does not care about the rug, and he has a slightly softer, well, more gentle voice than BR. In contrast, I suppose, but he's certainly no less dangerous. You were reporting on what we achieved this night, no? If we achieved anything? I would estimate the pack that attacked us at 50 beasts or more, my lord captain. Of that, we killed at least 20, perhaps 30. I did not consider it worth the risk of losing more horses to have the carcasses brought in tonight. In the morning I will have them gathered and burned, those that aren't dragged off in the dark. Besides these two, there were at least a dozen other men. I believe we disposed of 4 or 5, but it is unlikely we will find any bodies given the Dark Friends' propensity for carrying away their dead to hide their losses. This seems to have been a coordinated ambush, but that raises the question of... So I read that, at least a dozen other men, disposed or 4 of 5. I'm thinking, who else was there? Because we only knew about 3. This didn't make sense to me. Make it make sense to me. And then they do make it make sense to me. Perrin's worried about Elias for a moment. He thinks either they're dead or they've abandoned him. The gray-haired man did a laugh just then, a rich, wry chuckle that made a red spot bloom on each of BR's cheeks. So, child BR, it is your considered estimate that we were attacked, in a planned ambush, by upwards of 50 wolves and better than half a score of dark friends, yes? Perhaps when you've seen a few more actions. But, my lord Captain Bornhold, I would say 6 or 8 wolves, child BR, and perhaps no other humans than these 2. You have the true zeal, but no experience outside the cities. It is a different thing bringing the light when streets and houses are far distant. Wolves have a way of seeming more than they are in the night, and men also. 6 or 8 at most, I think. BR's flush deepened slowly. I also suspect they were here for the same reason we are. The only easy water for at least a day in any direction. A much simpler explanation than spies or traitors within the children, and the simplest explanation is usually the truest. You will learn, with experience. Or BR was outright lying. But no, I don't think he was outright lying. I think he's just, as the captain said, inexperienced. He sends a very embarrassed but hateful look toward the prisoners, and Perrin thinks, he hates us even more now for hearing this, but why did he hate us in the first place? Because you're not a zealot, Perrin. People hate because they like to hate. There's no other real reason. BR tests out the axe, and he says, excellently balanced, my lord captain. Plainly made, but by a very good weaponsmith, perhaps even a master. Not a villager's weapon, my lord captain, nor a farmer's, he says, and his eyes burned darkly at the prisoners. So he's suggesting they stole the axe. Then we get to the interrogation. No. The gray-haired man turned toward Perrin and Egwin with a weary, slightly chiding smile, a kindly grandfather who knew his grandchildren had been up to some mischief. My name is Joffrem Bornhold, he told them. You are Perrin, I understand. But you, young woman, what is your name? Perrin glowered at him, but Egwin shook her head. Don't be silly, Perrin. I'm Egwin. Just Perrin and just Egwin, Bornhold murmured. But I suppose if you truly are dark friends, you wish to hide your identities as much as possible. Again, zealot, you can rely on any degree of paranoia to justify a reason why they would be dark friends. Perrin protests angrily, we aren't dark friends! At which point BR smacks him in the face with the blunt end of the axe. And I'm thinking, man, don't... I think of the Batman movie where the Joker says, never start with the head. But also, it's like they haven't even asked any questions yet. He said they aren't dark friends. Now, do I expect you to believe him at first? No. But I don't see how saying we're not dark friends, without a follow-up question to it, merits the attack. Yet, look, if I'm coming at it from the White Cloak's perspective, sure, you're gonna get to a point where you torture them regardless to get more information. I'm just saying, don't start with the head. Egwene shouts, "You have no right!" At which point, BR attacks her. Egwene is able to duck out of the way just in time, fortunately, and BR says, "You will keep a civil tongue when speaking to an anointed of the light, or you will have no tongue." The worst of it was his voice still had no emotion at all. Cutting out their tongues would give him no pleasure and no regret. It was just something he would do. Yeah, I don't like this guy. I don't like him at all. But we've got our good cop, bad cop dynamic going on. Bornhald comes in. "Go easy, child BR. I expect you do not know much about the Anointed or about Lords Captain of the Children of the Light, do you?" "No, I thought not." "Well, for child BR's sake at least, try not to argue or shout, yes? I want no more than that you should walk in the light, and letting anger get the better of you won't help any of us." Again, I hear that, and I don't trust it. I think there's basically nothing they could truly say. Even he's slightly kinder to Egwene, but I don't think, short of her magically becoming a zealot tomorrow, would be enough to convince him. And like, even if she did, it's like, you just changed in one day. How can I? You're clearly faking it. So it's lose-lose. Perrin thinks, "For child BR's sake." And then smart Perrin, very smart Perrin, he noticed that the Lord Captain did not tell BR to leave them alone. BR met his eyes and smiled. The smile touched only his mouth, but the skin of his face drew tighter until it looked like a skull. Perrin shivered. Again, I think it's that good cop, bad cop dynamic that the two of them are going for. "I have heard of this thing of men running with wolves," Bornhald said musingly, "though I have not seen it before. Men supposedly talking with wolves and with other creatures of the Dark One. A filthy business. It makes me fear the last battle is indeed coming soon." The last battle, both caps, presumably being the battle against the Dark One. "Wolves aren't," but he catches himself. "Wolves aren't creatures of the Dark One. They hate the Dark One. At least they hate Trollocs and Fades." Bornhald nods and says, "Who told you that?" Egwene jumps in. Perhaps the first mistake, or not. We'll talk about truth in a moment. "A warder. He said wolves hate Trollocs and Trollocs are afraid of wolves." Perrin was glad she had not mentioned Elias. "A warder, a creature of the Tarvalon witches. What else would that sort tell you when he is a dark friend himself and a servant of dark friends? Do you not know Trollocs have wolves' muzzles and teeth and wolves' fur?" Guilt by association / appearance. But also I see the logic in the conclusion. I don't know how freely information is shared amongst different groups and societies in this world. And obviously the Aes Sedai have their reputation, likely for a reason, to a point. So I'm genuinely wondering how reasonable a conclusion this association is. Especially if the Walk with Wolves legends are so old and only now coming back into the world, which is, I think, what was suggested in an earlier Perrin chapter. Perrin's head is fuzzy from the attack. Egwene says, "Not all of them. Some of them have horns like rams or goats or hawk's beaks or all sorts of things." And it sounds like Egwene will intend to lie about their story. And I'm like, how can you, what makes you think these are wise things to say for the moment? I feel like mentioning the warder, at least right off the bat, wasn't necessarily the smartest choice. Bornhald shook his head sadly. "I give you every chance and you dig yourself deeper with every word." He raises one finger. "You run with wolves, creatures of the dark." A second finger. "You admit to being acquainted with a warder, another creature of the Dark One. I doubt he would have told you what he did if it was only in passing." A third finger. "You, boy, carry a Tarvalon mark in your pocket. Most men outside Tarvalon get rid of those as fast as they can. Unless they serve the Tarvalon witches." Now that's a big lore drop right there. The children of the light can sense these things or figure out these things or know the markers. And now we know that they know. So it may be, I don't know that they'll believe it, but it may be that Perrin's best defense here is the earnest one. The I didn't know it was a marker, because that is the truth. Again, I bet the White Cloaks won't believe it, but nevertheless. He lifts a fourth finger. You carry a fighting man's weapon while you dress like a farm boy. A skulker, then. The thumb rose. You know Trollocs and Myrddraal. This far south, only a few scholars, and those who have traveled in the borderlands believe they are anything but stories. Perhaps you have been to the borderlands? If so, tell me where. I have traveled a good deal in the borderlands. I know them well. No? Ah, well then. The grandfatherly expression said that grandchildren had been up to some very serious mischief indeed. Why do you not tell me the truth of how you came to be running in the night with wolves? So I actually really liked this. I like how logically he puts together these bits of information. I like how he clearly doesn't know and asks possible likelihoods, possibilities. And I like the way that Jordan weaves in the grandfatherly character of him with it. Egwene opens her mouth, prepared to speak, and Perrin sees that she's about to do one of the prepared lies, but Perrin judges that if they're caught in a lie, there will be no way for them to ever believe the truth, and so he judges that the truth is the best option. And again, I find myself chuckling in that Rand and Matt are telling the wrong people the truth, and Perrin here is in situations where he is forced to tell the truth. The first time to the right people. This second time, there's really no other choice. There's no other reasonable choice. Perrin says, "We're from the Two Rivers." Egwene stares at him, but then he tells a version of the truth. So there are sort of kind of some lies or misrepresentations in there, which I actually think might end up making things a bit more difficult for them, but I don't even really think it matters. I think they will make up their mind no matter what. Again, it's the good cop, bad cop thing. The two of them had left the Two Rivers to seek Caemlyn. On the way, they had heard of the ruins of a great city, but when they found Shadar Logoth, there were Trollocs there. The two of them managed to escape across the river Arenal, but by that time they were completely lost. Then they fell in with a man who offered to guide them to Caemlyn. He had said his name was none of their business, and he hardly seemed friendly, but they needed a guide. The first either of them had seen of wolves had been after the Children of Light had appeared. All they had been trying to do was hide so they would not get eaten by wolves or killed by the men on horses. He finishes with, "If we'd known you were Children of the Light, we'd have gone to you for help." And, okay, so that's a lie. Second off, these guys don't ask where this third person, whose name they didn't know, went off to. Third off, I can only imagine the Children of the Light know their own reputation, and therefore have to wonder if they can see through that lie at the very end. BR snorts with disbelief, but Perrin doesn't care. The captain says, "There's no warder in that." At which point, Egwene jumps in. "We met him in Baerlon. The city was crowded with men who had come down from the mines after the winter, and we were put at the same table in an inn. We only talked to him for the length of a meal." And this point, the captain surprises me. "Give them back their belongings, Child BR. Not the weapons, of course. Or are you one of those who have taken to looting the unenlightened, Child BR? It is a bad business, that, yes? No man can be a thief and walk in the light." BR is struggling with disbelief at the suggestion. Egwene is very surprised. She says, "Then you're letting us go?" And Bornhald says, "Of course not, child. You may be telling the truth about being from the Two Rivers, since you know about Baerlon and the mines, but Shadar Logoth? That is a name very, very few know, most of them dark friends, and anyone who knows enough to know the name knows enough not to go there. I suggest you think of a better story on the journey to Amador. You will have time, since we must pause in Caemlyn. Preferably the truth, child. There is freedom in truth and the light." So yeah, again, that seems like a very logical conclusion to come to based off of what was presented to him. The big thing is they're going to Amador by way of Caemlyn. Don't know anything about Amador. I don't recall it being mentioned in any great detail. If I had to guess, it's their headquarters, which that might have been stated earlier. But the big thing will be Caemlyn. They aren't just going to happen to end up in Caemlyn at the same time as Mat and Rand and Moiraine. That's going to be a wonderful reunion. I'm so excited for that reunion. I can only imagine that it will not end up happening. I'm very curious what's going to happen. But the other big thing here is he says to give their belongings back. But it does not say whether or not that includes the marker, Moiraine's marker. I want to know. Because does that speak to the White Cloaks' confidence in their ability to handle an Aes Sedai? Or does it suggest that they intend to ambush the Aes Sedai? Do they even know that just because he has a marker, that must therefore mean the Aes Sedai is searching for that person? Very curious. At the end of that, BR takes some offense, I guess, the suggestion that they're going to be brought to Amador. He says, "You can't! It is not allowed!" Bornhald raised one eyebrow quizzically, and BR pulled himself up short, swallowing. "Forgive me, my lord captain. I forgot myself, and I humbly beg pardon and submit myself for penance. But as my lord captain himself has pointed out, we must reach Caemlyn in time, and with most of our remounts gone, we will be hard-pressed enough without carrying prisoners along. And what would you suggest? The penalty for dark friends is death. There is no truce with the shadow. There is no mercy for dark friends." This guy just wants to up and kill them. No questions. Doesn't matter. Doesn't care. He has come to his conclusion. I do not like this guy. "Zeal is to be applauded, child Biar. But as I must often tell my son Dane, overzealousness can be a grievous fault. Remember that the tenets also say, no man is so lost that he cannot be brought to the light. These two are young. They cannot yet be deep in the shadow. They can yet be led to the light. If they will only allow the shadow to be lifted from their eyes, we must give them that chance." And in a way, what this guy does is doubly cruel, because he makes it sound here as if he intends to give them both the chance to join the light, except for the fact that he has no intention of giving Perrin a chance. "If you refuse to come to the light by the time we reach Amador, I will be forced to turn you over to the questioners, and beside them Biar's zeal is but a candle beside the sun. Repent. Renounce the Dark One, come to the light, confess your sins, and tell what you know of this vileness with wolves, and you will be spared that. You will walk free in the light." His gaze centered on Perrin, and he sighed sadly, ice filled Perrin's spine. "But you, just Perrin from the Two Rivers, you killed 2 of the children." He touched the axe that BR still held. "For you, I fear, a gibbet waits in Amador." Yeah, so much for him having a chance to walk in the light. But hey, he killed 2 men. Or was it Hopper? Because I thought he got knocked out pretty darn quickly. Unless they are thinking that Elias's kills were Perrin's, maybe? I'm not so sure. There was nothing really to suggest that. Anyway, very excited. I am so excited for the group to converge at Caemlyn, possibly. Hopefully. Think that's all I got. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks, bye.